England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy. And we've got some increasing, strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland. Difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Ben Leo. Tonight,
priority and the first step is to set up the new Border Security Command and to increase our law enforcement.
Labour promised to smash the gangs with a fancy new Border Security Command. So why is the rebranded Home Office unit still without a boss more than 40 days after they won power? Meanwhile, it's revealed a migrant who tried killing a commuter by pushing him onto tube tracks in London was appealing deportation from Britain despite committing a string of crimes here. So, just what exactly do you have to do to be deported from the UK? And
AstraZeneca vaccine is safe. The experts are telling us that it's safe, and I would urge everybody who's invited to come forward to have the...
He told you the COVID vaccine was safe and effective. So why are 14,000 people now applying for compensation from the government's vaccine damage payment scheme? And is Starmer guilty of spreading dangerous misinformation? Tomorrow's newspaper front pages are on the way, and tonight's panel are raring to go too. I'm joined by businessman and Brexiteer Ben Habib, political commentator Jonathan Liss, and communications officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim. Oh, and what do you reckon happened to this brazen fare dodger?
You need to leave the train. I'm not leaving the train. I'm not leaving the train. You're delaying all these people's journey. I'm not delaying no one. You are.
When will Labour take the small boats seriously? Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 9 o'clock. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel to push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. It comes as over 20 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah has continued firing rockets in retaliation. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister expressed cautious optimism about a ceasefire deal with Hamas, including for the release of hostages. The militant group isn't present for the talks, but as senior officials claim there's been no progress in reaching a deal. Ukraine says it has destroyed a second key bridge in Russia's Kursk region. It comes as Kyiv continues its unprecedented incursion on Russian soil. Meanwhile, there are concerns for the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant after a drone strike. It caused an explosion just outside the site's protected area, although no casualties have been reported. The facility, the largest of its kind in Europe, has been occupied by Russian soldiers since the early stages of the war. Back in the UK, extreme misogyny will be treated as terrorism for the first time under the government's plans to combat the radicalisation of young men online. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. Official figures reveal almost 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. At least 9 small boats made the journey following 2 days of no reported migrant arrivals. It brings the total number of migrants reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. But the Home Office insists it's creating a new border security command to tackle the problem. A don't swim alert's been issued for a popular Devon seaside town because of a sewage leak. South West Water says it can't keep up with the spill caused by a burst pipe at a nearby pumping station in Exmouth. It's apologised and insists engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. It comes after the regulator Ofwat announced water bills will rise an average of £94 over 5 years. That's to cover the cost of upgrading Victorian-age infrastructure. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't.
His opponent, Kamala Harris, is embarking on a bus tour through Western Pennsylvania today, one day ahead of the Democratic National Convention. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. A further 21 illegal migrants crossed the Channel to Britain today. That's on top of the 500 I told you about last night. The total under Labour's watch now exceeds 5,500 since they took power on July the 4th. So despite the bluster, nothing has changed since Labour were gifted the keys to number 10. Defenders of this government will say, oh, well, it's only been 6 weeks. Come on, give them a chance. But I say, for all Keir Starmer's gusto about his fancy new border security command, which is basically a rebrand of an existing Home Office department. It's been revealed today that the government still hasn't even found someone to lead the unit that will magically solve this crisis. Reports today suggest Labour is still in the, quote, final stages of recruitment for the Border Security Command boss, who will be the person chosen to lead Keir Starmer's crackdown on smuggling gangs. They'll be paid a pretty cushy wage of up to 200 grand a year for their efforts and lead nearly 100 people who have moved into the Command HQ based at the Home Office. But as Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly said last night, 6 weeks and still no sign of Labour's phantom border command or a single gang smashed. So they better get a move on, because it appears we struggle to rid ourselves of violent migrants once they do hit our shores. It was also revealed today that the Kurdish man Sinhir, trying to kill a London commuter by pushing him onto tube tracks, was in fact a sex crime migrant already facing deportation from Britain for a litany of criminal behaviour. Bradshaw, who's 24, shoved the stranger onto the tracks as a train approached in February because he thought he gave him a dirty look. Yes, that's all it took. He was recently convicted of attempted murder for that behaviour, but the truth is, he shouldn't have even been here in the first place. Shorsh had 12 convictions for 21 offences, including assault, antisocial behaviour and outraging public decency. The Home Office did try to deport him, but he lodged an appeal with the Immigration Tribunal, which was still ongoing at the time of the attack. As you can see it again here, a train just seconds away from killing him. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Just what the hell do you have to do to get deported from Britain these days? Let's get the thoughts of my panel. Businessman and Brexiteer Ben Habib, political campaigner Jonathan Liss, and communications chief at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim. Good evening to you all.
Good evening, how are you?
Very well, I'm very good, yes, thank you for joining me. So look, what do you have to do to get deported from Britain these days, if not a string of convictions like that wrong'un we saw at a Circus tube station?
It's absolutely absurd, and I think it really is the Home Office's fault. I mean, the fact that these particular people are allowed to stay, despite the fact they have a litany of criminal backgrounds. And actually, the point of the matter is, this is not a lone case. There are so many people out there in this country roaming the streets that are capable of doing horrendous things like this.
And Ben Habib, what about Labour's border command? You know, this rebranded unit in the Home Office, which is going to magically solve the
Well, the question I've got for Labour are where are the people smuggling gangs? The people smuggling gangs aren't in the United Kingdom. They're based in Europe. So you would need your border command to have the right to go into Europe, identify who these smugglers are, and then use whatever criminal justice system that we would have the right to use in European territory to take them to account. And
are you making a case for increased cooperation with the European Union at all? Because I know of an organisation where that would have been absolutely seamless, where our officers could have gone and coordinated with each other absolutely brilliantly.
When we were in the EU, we never actually...
The point I'm making...
Well, we were part of Europol.
The point I'm making is that the domestic agencies which they brought together for this Border Security Command work entirely in the United Kingdom. These smugglers are all in Europe. The Europeans have already tried to identify these smuggling gangs. They've already tried to shut them down. It's like whack-a-mole. You can't do it. And the reason we have illegal migration, and the only reason we have illegal migration, is because no one is prepared to enforce their borders. The Italians aren't prepared to do it, the Balkan states aren't prepared to do it, Greece isn't prepared to do it, and neither is any silly country that has the stupidity to join the Schengen zone prepared to enforce their borders. So without borders, once you're into Italy, you find it no problem at all to get to Calais. It's not about people smuggling gangs. It's about the ability to travel freely through Europe. You get on a dinghy, and then you're faced with Border Force, which has all the strength of a tea-serving service with a Kit Kat, a warm blanket, and then the promise of a 4-star hotel when you land on the shores of the United Kingdom.
You end up with wrong'uns like that guy.
And that is our border force.
Come on, Ben, come on.
Come on, that's what happens.
I'm sorry. People are not being put up in the Hilton, OK? Like, we can either have a serious conversation about this, where we talk about the facts, or we can kind of have a rabble-rousing chat where we kind of just deal in stereotypes. I don't think that's particularly helpful.
Do you agree the Schengen zone is not helpful?
No, I don't think the Schengen zone is unhelpful, and I also think it's a little bit offensive to tell sovereign governments that their actions are stupid.
They are not sovereign.
They
Jonathan, they're not sovereign.
They think they are sovereign.
They are not sovereign. The minute you take your borders down,
I don't think it helps to kind of insult the partners that you need to say that they're in the wrong political systems, because, my God, they can level that charge against us quite successfully.
You take your borders down, you face the consequences of not having borders.
As I said to you minutes ago, actually, within the EU, there were very, very good mechanisms for dealing at an EU level with this issue, which you have already identified requires the European, because it's also a European problem.
Really? If that was true, then when we were in the European Union, we wouldn't have had these problems. But that isn't the case, is it, right? When we were in the European Union, we still saw this huge influx of money.
Well, actually, it's got a lot worse since. It's got a lot worse since Brexit. Actually, a lot of the tools that might have been used, Bream, have actually now gone. A lot of the tools that you had, the refugee, etc., the Dublin Convention, etc.
We're going down a rather deep path. Can I ask you just basically about the Labour's Border Security Command? Why aren't they getting a move on and getting a rocket up their backside and getting a boss in that rebranded unit and getting on with the things they promised to do?
Well, look, I am, as I always say, I'm not a spokesman for the Labour Party. I think, in general, when you are announcing a series of new policies and you just come into government and you have 1,000 things to do, it's important that the timing for that should be done, to do it successfully rather than to do it at speed.
But they've had years.
We don't have time.
Well, you can't set up a recruitment tender before you win the election, and obviously it takes time to get the right candidates. I don't think that we can. I think we can complain about this. I think a much more interesting conversation to have about this is whether this command will actually work and whether this is actually the solution to the small boats crisis. I happen to think that, look, if you do actually take effective action against the gangs, that's great, but that's not going to solve the problem, because we know there are going to be people who are trying to come here. What I've said for many, many months is that you should have processing centres in France so you can actually deal with people in France before they get on those unsafe boats, thereby smashing the criminal gangs model, and also you can provide safe and legal means for people to come to Britain so they can claim asylum.
What about border enforcement? Simple, old-fashioned border enforcement, which worked for hundreds of years to protect nations across Europe and the United Kingdom. What's the problem with it?
Australia seems to be able to do it, and we can't. I want to add to that point. I think that the primary reason why people are coming to this country illegally is because there aren't those safe and legal routes for them to come, so we don't know what their criminal backgrounds are. However, I think the reason why those particular people want to come is because they get those freebies. They do get a hotel, and they do get free stuff, and they are able to work in the gig economy illegally. So I think we have to be honest with ourselves and look at the size of the welfare state.
Well, they can't work legally, though. They can't work legally.
But they can work legally.
People can do things. Of course, people can do things. The same people can do things illegally. OK, well, fine, but they shouldn't be doing that. The law doesn't provide for that. That's not something that...
But they're doing it, right?
Right, but then you can't complain that people can do things illegally. Well, of course, people shouldn't be doing things illegally, but actually they should be. But doesn't that just prove the point about what the previous government was doing? Of course, the Home Office failed. Of course, the Home Office failed because they deliberately kept these people in indefinite detention, which is an absolute obscenity, by the way. And they changed the law. They did change the law.
They were never detained.
It was effective detention because they were being kept in limbo indefinitely on the promise that they were going to Rwanda, when we all knew that Rwanda was never going to take off, and that a maximum of 500 people get to Rwanda anyway.
Ben, can I ask you, how long do Labour and Sir Keir Starmer have before they come under real political pressure with migration, stopping the small boats?
It's already done. They've exhausted any sort of grace period that they had as a government. They're done.
But is it not the case that their voters aren't particularly concerned about the small boats crisis anyway, so they wouldn't lose much support?
The entire United Kingdom is concerned with our borders.
Indeed.
Absolutely. The Labour Party did not win the last election. It was the Conservatives that lost.
Sorry, can we have a fact check on that particular last point?
They received less votes this election than they did in 2019.
No, I'm sorry. This is absolute nonsense. We can't change the goalposts under our election system, which is completely nonsensical. Labour Party won. You can't just say Labour Party didn't win.
They have an overwhelming
The Reform Party certainly didn't win.
They have an overwhelming majority in Parliament, no doubt. But they do not have popular support.
Yes.
And small C Conservatives, which are right across the political spectrum, left, middle and right, all want our borders enforced. They are proud of this country, they want to protect this country, and it is people like the Labour Party, and particularly Keir Starmer, who is basically, in my opinion, anti-British. Because
what a ridiculous thing to say. What a ridiculous thing to say. He disagrees with you.
His inability to put first the interests of this country. He doesn't do it. He is interested in some kind of global agenda, and immigration isn't on the list of his...
Why do right-wing people always say this?
I'm not right-wing.
But no, I'm sorry, Ben. Why can't we just say across this panel that people have a different conception of what is in the national interest? That's why you compete for election. That's why people either elect you... You can't... But Ben, it's a really important point. It's a really important...
You cannot have a nation without borders.
Point.
You can't have a nation without borders.
For you to call your opponents anti-British, I find really offensive.
Starmer is anti-British. I'll say it again and again.
I would never call you anti-British, even though I think that your vision for Britain is absolutely horrendous. I would never call you anti-British.
Last word to you, 20 seconds.
It's perfectly reasonable to have that particular perspective and to actually believe that Starmer is an anti-British, because ultimately, if you don't believe that he is aligning with your vision, that's a perfectly reasonable response to have. And if you don't believe that immigration is being restricted and you see what's happening across our country, you can claim that the person leading it does not care about the country's future.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Keir Starmer hasn't even got the courage to address the concerns of people who are worried about migration and the change of their culture and society. He just brands them all as far right.
No, that's not true, Ben. It's not. No, sorry, Ben. We have to debate in facts. He did not say that people who are concerned about migration were far right. That is a lie. That is a lie. He said that the people who are turning up to torch asylum hotels and to throw bricks at mosques were far right, because they are. But we have to be absolutely clear on this. People who are concerned about immigration are not far right. I would never say that. No one sensible would say that.
I'm glad you're not on that bandwagon. Thank you very much, Reem, Ben Habib, Jonathan List.
Fiery start.
Yes, indeed. We'll return shortly. Coming up is misogyny, a form of terrorism. Well, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, seems to think so, goodness me. But up next, around 14,000 people have applied for COVID-19 vaccine damage compensation. And to discuss this, I'll be joined by former horse racing champion flat jockey Seb Sanders, whose wife was, he claims, really injured and left paralysed by the AstraZeneca vaccine. He's with me next. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. Back in a tick.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Losing someone, saying goodbye, never easy, but there is a way, maybe, to make it slightly more manageable, depending how you think.
Yeah, we're going to speak now to the comedian and British icon, frankly, Paul Chuckle. He thinks it's time to put the fun into funeral. This is after, sadly, he lost his brother, Barry, and Paul now wants to highlight what he perceives to be changing attitudes to the way we hold funerals.
Well, Paul, a very good morning to you. First of all, condolences about Barry. We all knew him, and obviously you still miss him.
Yes, good morning to you too. Yeah, obviously, it was 6 years ago yesterday that he passed away. It's gone very quick, but in Barry's funeral case, it was a thing of celebrating his life, really. All his friends were there, people we've worked with over the years, and we just talked all afternoon and evening about his life. It's more of a celebration.
New research from Co-op Funeral Care says that people are more coming round to this way of thinking, that in the way they dress and what they sing, and taking selfies at funerals, all sorts of things. And by and large, I mean, bearing in mind how you said goodbye to Barry, which I believe was at Rotherham Football Club, was it?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's always a very sad day when you lose someone. But as a report from Co-op Funeral Care says, a funeral doesn't have to be a sad day, which it wasn't there. See, Barry and myself always been big Rotherham United fans, and the thing was to have his funeral, really, most of his funeral on the day at New York Stadium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight. Now, most of you at home probably have forgotten about the madness of the COVID days, or at least want to, but for thousands of people, the reality of what happened back then is still a living nightmare. New figures reported today show nearly 14,000 people in Britain have applied for payments from the government for alleged harm caused by COVID vaccines. Freedom of information requests made by the Daily Telegraph show that payments have already been awarded for conditions including stroke, heart attack, dangerous blood clots, inflammation of the spinal cord, excessive swelling of the vaccinated limb and facial paralysis, just to name a few. Around 97% of claims awarded relate to the AstraZeneca jab, with just a handful of payments made for damage from Pfizer or Moderna. Those who are successful receive a one-off payment of £120,000, but so far the government has made payments in just 175 cases under its vaccine damage payment scheme. That's fewer than 2% of people who have applied. Thousands of others have been turned down by government medical assessors who say there's no concrete proof the jabs caused harm. Hundreds have been rejected because they're, quote, not disabled enough. Seb Sanders, a former British champion flat jockey, has been fighting on behalf of his wife, Leona, who was left hospital-bound after 3 COVID jabs. She suffered swelling of the spinal cord, a known side effect of the vaccine, and left her unable to walk for 7 months. And unfortunately, her condition has continued to deteriorate to this day, not least after contracting sepsis in hospital. And I'm delighted to say Seb joins me now. Good evening, Seb. Thank you for coming in. Look, this is a really heart-wrenching story because there's so many thousands of people who took these vaccines in good faith back in the day during COVID. They were told it was safe, they were told it was effective, they were told that it would stop transmission and you wouldn't kill granny. And the truth of it is, as we've found out now, that these vaccines caused harm to a good load of people, didn't they?
Yeah.
Including your wife. Yeah, just explain what happened to your wife.
Look, I mean, first things first, if this hadn't happened to me, I'd be sceptical. And unfortunately, this has happened to me, and I'm having to live this lifestyle at the moment. My wife, at the moment, is in Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. We need a lost her at the end of May, and she's basically paralysed from the head down. From the neck down, From the neck down, I should say.
So take me back to when she took her. Yeah. There's Leona on the screen there. Is that your little girl there?
That's my daughter, yeah.
Oh,
that's my daughter. Darcy, she's 20, yeah.
Leona and Darcy. When did Leona take the first vaccine, and when did she first start experiencing it?
Look, when she had the first vaccine, she had a drug in her called rituximab, which was to deal with the vasculitis she had. She's got a form of vasculitis, which is Wegener's granulosis or something like that. I'm not a doctor, but and whether that helped her or hindered her, I don't know. But when she had the second jab, she was in the bathroom. I was in the bedroom, and I heard an almighty thud, and she'd collapsed in the bathroom. I shouted through, "You all right?" And she went, "Yeah, yeah." And it was, we didn't put 2 and 2 together, and it took ages for it to come back to normal, but it never really did overall.
How soon after that second jab did she collapse? Was it hours or days?
It was obviously, I think it was a day or two.
Right.
It can't specifically put a thing to it, but I remember the moment like it was yesterday.
And she went on to have a third jab, which was her booster. She still had confidence in the vaccines because you hadn't equated the two.
Look, my wife was worried about the vaccines, and she spoke to the GP and people at the vasculitis clinic, and she was basically told that she's perfectly safe, but she might not get antibodies because she's immunosuppressed because of the vasculitis, and they told her it was perfectly safe.
OK, so she went on to have a third AstraZeneca vaccine. What happened after that?
Well, the third one was the Pfizer, sorry, but all of a sudden the paralysis started going up her legs, and we had to, you know, I tried to get her X-rays, believe it or not, and because of the COVID and everything, it was all a bit, the NHS was a bit jumbled, and she got turned down. So I rang the vasculitis clinic, and they sorted it out for us at Addenbrooke's. I believe it in Cambridge, and she ended up having an MRI scan, and they found the swelling. But to get into Addenbrooke's, you can't believe this. I got there at 10:30 in the morning. It was all organised, but we had to go through A&E. Now, I wasn't allowed in A&E with my wife because of the COVID restrictions at the time. And so I dropped her off at the door. I got a wheelchair for her to sit in, which is just like a wooden bench wheelchair that you get at all hospitals now. And 12 o'clock at night, she got taken to a ward. So she'd been there since like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. She got a load of steroids and treatment and whatever, come home, and within 10 days, it had got worse again. So we had to do exactly the same thing, and we'd actually had, we met a specialist at Addenbrooke's, but we still had to go back through A&E and had the same problems getting back into a ward.
And what did they say? Did they equate it to the vaccine, to the jab?
Yeah.
They did?
Yeah, the second time they did. The first time they were a bit grumpy about it, but everyone was, you know, the speculation was coming around, and I'd looked into it, and I'd started putting two and two together, and with everything that had happened, you know, it was just ticking all the boxes.
And you just showed me some paperwork from the doctors, from Leona's file, and it said, what does it say in there? You just showed me.
It says it's likely to be the COVID vaccine, and this was back in 2022.
OK, so there's a good chance, according to the doctors, that your wife's rather crippling symptoms, and she still suffers today, was because of the COVID vaccine. So you did what thousands of other people have done, which is go to the government's vaccine damage payment. You think you've got a case in your hands, you think you're entitled to £120,000 in compensation. What happened then?
Well, look, I mean, my wife got moved from Addenbrooke's to the spinal unit in Sheffield, and when she come back from Sheffield, she was... You know, she was on the right track to, you know, getting back some sort of normal life. And so I applied for the vaccine damage, and 14 months it took for them to come back to me. And I wasn't constantly ringing them. I was ringing them every 2 or 3 months to see what was happening, and it was trying to get everybody coordinated, i.e. like pain clinic doctors, neurology, and all the doctors that Leona had seen. And they just said, oh, it's just a matter of time, no problem, it's all going fine and everything. Then I get a letter back 14 months later and saying that the probabilities it wasn't the jab. And the probabilities that they had got put down was like Leona falling over and whatever. I've been married to my wife for nearly 26 years, and she's never fell over.
So they just dismissed it? They said,
I mean,
not to do with the jab.
But the problem is they were clashing everything with the vasculitis. And I've spoke to, you know, the top people at vasculitis in Addenbrooke's, and they're world-renowned. And they've said under no circumstances has it has anything to do with the vasculitis.
What's your life like now? What's Leona's life like? You care for her, don't you?
She's been in hospital now for nearly a year. Nearly lost her in May. She got moved to a rehab unit in Norwich called Coleman, and she got blue lighted across. I was actually working in the afternoon in London, and so I headed off up there, and she got blue lighted across. It's only a couple of miles. She had aspiration pneumonia, urine infection, and COVID. I got to the hospital, and we'd signed a form to say that Leona wouldn't be resuscitated. So I went into A&E, and they said she was in resuscitation. So that walk around the corner from the A&E to resuscitation, you can't believe what was going through your mind. The most difficult time I've ever had to face.
What was going through your mind?
I was going to see a body. I got round there and she was struggling to breathe. Everything really scary. And as anyone knows, if you're at different hospitals, none of the NHS hospitals talk to each other. So I got there. There was no one from Coleman with Leona. No one knew what condition Leona was in. So this is like 3 hours after I'd found out they were taken across to Norwich. And I was relaying to him the problems that Leona has had and has got. I was like a liaison officer.
And she's still there today, as we speak?
She's still there today.
Seb, do you feel like you have, in one sense, lost Leona and the life you had?
I got told to deal with it like bereavement.
By who? Who told you that?
A doctor. I still have hope, and I will always have hope.
Why did she get the vaccine?
Because we wanted our lives back. Everybody wanted their lives back. And because Leona was immunosuppressed, we really looked after her, you know, in the sense that she never went out the house for nearly 2 years, you know, into town or anything, because we were petrified that if she got it, we'd lose her.
So you were listening to advice from the government and so on?
100%.
Let me just play this selection of clips from back in the day about the COVID vaccines, and we'll get your thoughts about it afterwards.
Second thing I should say is that I had my jab, AstraZeneca, last Sunday, which was fantastic. So that has given me an edge. I've been doing lots of media in the last 2 or 3 days where Big asks, you know, is it safe, etc. And in addition to me saying, yes, it is safe, and I'd encourage everybody who's invited to come forward to take it up. The AstraZeneca vaccine is safe. The experts are telling us that it's safe. And I would urge everybody who's invited to come forward to have the vaccine.
Frankly, if you're not vaccinated at the moment and you're eligible and you've got no health reason for not being vaccinated, you're not just irresponsible. I mean, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. I mean, that is, truthfully, you are.
And let me stress that these vaccines are safe and effective. And it was good to see the World Health Organization today confirm its support for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
What do you make of that, looking back?
Frustrating. Frustrating that, you know, I feel I'd have my wife back right now if we'd have understood the risks.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have took the chance.
Seb, thank you for coming in. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. You are, of course, a champion flat jockey, and I'm a massive horse racing fan, so
yeah, sure.
I wish it was, you know, under those kind of circumstances. But keep us updated with Leona, how she's getting on. We all send our prayers to you, family, and her for a recovery. And yeah, thank you for being with us.
Thanks ever so much.
A spokesman for the NHS Business Services Authority, who handles the vaccine damage payment scheme, they said the Department of Health and Social Care is responsible for the policy and legislation that governs the VDPS. The NHS BSA's dedicated team works hard to do all we can to support claimants and actively make improvements to the claim process. We continually review our processes to further develop the way in which we manage claims and to better provide a better service for claimants. OK, there we go. Right, coming up next, as Prince Harry is told to apologise for slavery and King Charles axes his plans... let's start that again. Sorry. Coming up, is Prince Harry told to apologise for slavery in Colombia, and King Charles is at war with his brother Andrew, and the fact that he won't move out of Royal Lodge in Windsor Park. We're going to get the latest with Angela Levin. All that after the break.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fine evening of weather ahead, some hazy sunshine, but it will be turning cloudier from the west with rain arriving tomorrow. And that's because we've got some low pressure system out towards the west. But first of all, we do have a ridge of high pressure across most of the country, and we have fairly settled conditions through Sunday evening. So fairly dry and clear for much of the country, but we do start to see that frontal system pushing into western Scotland overnight, that rain turning more persistent here, and we do still have this strengthening southerly breeze arriving from the west as well. Cool though first across the east, and perhaps down into single figures in some rural spots as well. But it will be quite a bright start to the day across eastern parts, particularly for the northeast of Scotland at first. But we do have quite a lot of cloud and rain across western parts, and that will be turning more persistent as we head through the day. Again, some sunshine for the far east, but Northern Ireland, very much a cloudy day with that rain becoming more persistent through the morning. Wales will start to see some showery, drizzly showers moving up from the southwest, but central parts and the southeast of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy, and we've got some increasing strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland, difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth,
it's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight. I can talk now because the auto-cue's in the right place. Let's go live now to Colombia for the latest on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's so-called faux royal tour of the South American country. I'm joined by senior global reporter at the Mail Online, Nick Pisa, who's on the ground in Cali. Nick, good evening or good morning, wherever you are. What's the latest, please, on this tour? Harry and Meghan, what are they up to?
So, yes, as you say, this is the final day of the tour. They're wrapping up after being here for 4 days now in South America, in Colombia. Many, I think, to be honest with you, I'm one of my colleagues wondering what on earth were they doing here, really, because it seems to have raised more questions than answers. I mean, they've talked about some very worthy causes, cyberbullying, online violence, which is great, racism and women's equality. Great, but then again, at the end of the day, to the ordinary Colombian in the street who's trying to eke out a living on less than £900 a month, which is the average wage, they're thinking, what is this going to do to us? Especially when they see the amount of security that's surrounded the whole of this trip. You know, drones, helicopters, roads closed off, crossroads blocked. You know, they've had to go long detours back to their homes or places where they work. It's as I say, more questions than answers for the ordinary Colombian in the street.
So it's their last day today. When are they leaving and where are they going back to? Are they going back to California?
So they've just finished this morning a conference on Afro women in power, which was held at the main theatre here in Cali. And I should stress again, the security aspect is just, again, incredible. We were initially hoped that we would be able to get in and see this, but unfortunately we weren't able to. As the morning progressed, the police just pushed us further and further back beyond a cordon. In the end, we ended up almost a block away and weren't able to see anything, although very fortunately we discovered there was a live link which we were able to watch via YouTube and see what Meghan had to say about it. There was also a heckler who interrupted the Vice President who's hosting this visit, Francesca Marquez, who interrupted her speech, but no one interrupted Meghan's intervention.
Nick Pisa on the ground in Colombia. Thank you. I'll leave you to it. Safe travels, and thank you for being with us. I'm joined now by royal biographer Angela Levin. Angela, of course, you have had a nice history with Prince Harry, at least. You wrote his biography and so on and so on. What do you make of this tour in Colombia? What's it all about, really? It's all a bit strange, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a nonsense. I think they're playing royals. I think it's extremely rude, and I think that the King should now do something about it, particularly that Harry was told to apologise for slaves. Now, he can't get mixed up in all that. It's absolutely not. They've gone there not representing anybody, with no power. They like to be thought of as just sort of global brand. That's what they call themselves. So it's just nonsense.
Who's asked them to apologise for slavery? Local in Colombia?
The Vice President took Harry to one side and asked him if he will really do that.
I mean, that's extraordinary.
No, he can't. You know, well, she's very keen on reparation of slaves, and she saw Meghan on the Netflix, a 6-hour Netflix where you could fall asleep 10,000 times and was full of untruths. And she said, we share the same ideals and goals. So she thinks that she's got people there that will really help the slaves of 300-400 years ago. Now, this is very, very dangerous because they mustn't start getting their feet on this, and it's just not allowed. You just can't do it. And so I think they've really got to do something very much about it. And it's quite interesting that the Vice President didn't think very much about the Netflix thing, where Meghan did this terrible curtsy and mimicked that right out.
Yes.
And lost them a lot of supporters and said with a squeaky voice, "Hello, Your Majesty."
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible. But this time she taught 2 little girls how to curtsy to her. Now, the hypocrisy is beyond anything you can think of. The whole thing is hypocritical because he's extremely worried about his family, very anxious, won't bring them to the UK, but he will take them to away from in a very dangerous country where they had 3,000 police looking after them and 14 cars to make sure they weren't damaged in any way.
What do you think the King's thinking about all this? He's probably watching it from, from
well,
back
I think
home.
he's very busy with looking after himself and doing all the work he has. I know they don't look at these things straight away. The A's look at it and then they discuss it. There is going to be a discussion, though, in Scotland about things, about the royal family, and I do hope they'll do something about Harry and Meghan, because each time you think they've been doing something terrible, they do something worse. This is worse than when they were Africa, and you can't actually see them going through and pretending they are royal. All the things that they did were what Meghan wanted. She had a list and it was approved of. So all this nonsense that they did, which is actually, I can do it better than anybody else in the royal family.
Yeah. What would happen if Harry or Meghan did go rogue or roguer?
They already are rogue.
Exactly. If they really pushed the boat out and said, do you know what, I apologise. If Harry said, I apologise for my family's links to slavery, where would that leave the King, the monarchy?
Well, it's a very difficult position, isn't it? You then say, but they have no power, they have no position. Harry has stepped down from the royal family in 2020. Yes, that's right. And so, therefore, you can't listen to them. But you can then have to have this argument where they say, yes, but he promised, he did say, he's your son. You know, it's very tricky. I think it's very, very hot and dangerous.
And just briefly, talking about the King, he is in, he's in a massive row, I guess, with his brother Prince Andrew, who's refusing to move out of Royal Lodge, a big sort of cottage/mansion in Windsor Great Royal Park. What's going on there?
Well, it's got 30 rooms.
Left, by the way.
Yeah, 30 rooms in terrible condition. He has it there, but he hasn't got any money. King Charles pays $3 million to have people looking after him, protecting him, gives him $4 million a year so that he can live. But Andrew won't leave this home. He wants to stay there. Now, lots of people have to downsize. He refuses. It's now a big fight. After October, none of his protection people will be there. No money.
So the King gives him money to live off, lets him live in Royal Lodge, and but now Andrew's refusing to go, so the King has said, right, no protection, no security. So Andrew is essentially, he's a squatter in Royal Lodge now, is he?
Yeah, he will be. No, he's not a squatter because he signed a thing that he could stay there till later. But he had to do painting it every 2 or 3 years, and he had to look after it. And it's a terrible state. If you see pictures, they're shocking. Water coming through the ceiling and in a terrible condition. It needs a minimum of £7 million repairing.
Goodness me. Well, families, Angela? Who'd have them? Who'd pick them? Thank you so much, Angela Levin at Royal Bogford. Thank you for joining us this evening. Coming up next, is misogyny a form of terrorism? Well, our Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, seems to think so. Find out more in a second. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We got an incredible story this week of a young teenager who has raised more than £5,000 for charity.
13-year-old, just 13 years old, Cameron Hutchison cycled the West Highland Way with his dad, Colin, in just 25 hours, raising money for international food charity Mary's Meals. And the 96-mile route took Cameron and Colin to the foot of Ben Nevis.
Wow. Now, the organisation provides daily school meals to more than 2.4 million children in countries such as Syria, Haiti and Malawi.
We are delighted to be joined now by cyclist and fundraiser Cameron Hutchison. Cameron, it's so lovely to have you here. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Well, we're very impressed to have you. We are honoured to have you. First of all, do you like cycling?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite sports, so yeah, I just wanted to do that.
What kind of bike did you do that enormous distance in? Did you have a special bike? Was it adapted?
Well, it was my cross-country bike that I just normally use for cross-country races. So, yeah.
Wow.
You can actually see it on the screen there with the blue handlebars. That's the bike I was using.
We can, and quite a route you went on as well. So, Cameron, you're 13 years old. When did you start cycling?
I've sort of been cycling my whole life. So I got a little red balance bike when I was maybe 3 or 2, maybe. And then I kind of just got bigger bikes as I went on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. Now, the government has announced extreme misogyny will be treated as a form of terrorism under new government plans. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has vowed to crack down on people pushing harmful and hateful beliefs, quote-unquote, which includes extreme misogyny. The Home Office has commissioned a review to inform a new counter-extremism strategy on how to tackle the threat of extremist ideologies online and offline. OK, so I'm joined now by culture editor at A Further Inquiry, Khadija Khan. Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is basically Labour setting up the thought police, isn't it, Khadija?
This news has made big headlines since morning, but it's interesting that nobody from the government, no spokesperson, no MP, has made it clear that what is meant by extreme misogyny and how can violence against women be effectively addressed with a term so ambiguous. There is no such thing or no such need to compartmentalize misogyny by categorizing it as casual or extreme misogyny, in my opinion. And if this proposal, if it stands up to parliamentary scrutiny and becomes a law, legal policy, or some sort of guidelines, the prosecutor presumably would have to prove that a crime that is like terrorist act or hateful act was committed in conjunction with another crime that is rape or domestic violence. And what if they could not meet a threshold for extreme misogyny or an act of terrorism? I think there is no denial about this, that we do have a problem. Violence against women is on the rise, and it's widespread, to which the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillip, responded that it could take 20 years to deal with the current level of misogyny in our society. So if we are talking about 2 million women affected by domestic or sexual violence in a year, that's 40 million women in 20-year time. I was expecting some robust changes in the mechanism that deals with these kind of crimes, improvement in conviction rate. I was expecting some sort of drastic changes in police department to tackle with progressive culture of misogyny and to encourage women to come forward and report these cases. But here we are being lectured about how policing online hateful beliefs are more important, while knife crimes and sexual assaults on women on the British Railway is on the rise.
So, sorry to interject. Who decides what the threshold for misogyny is? I mean, if I said trans women shouldn't be playing in women's sports, I mean, who decides whether that's misogynistic or not?
That's the issue. They have no explanation for that. They have created this hype. In my opinion, this is a distraction from the real issue. There is another preposterous proposition put forward by the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillip. She said that the strategy we apply on countering Islamism and far-right extremism online, we can apply the same strategy on misogyny. Far-right extremism or Islamism, it's an ideology that is used to radicalize people, to brainwash people, who then carry on to commit violent act in order to gain ideological goals, you know. But misogyny, it is a very extreme emotion. It is extreme prejudice toward women. But as you said, we cannot decide that what is the threshold for extreme misogyny. And we should not forget that if this misogyny or the violence against women that occurs in actual world, in real world, that inflict harm on women and girls, we are talking about dealing with that violence. We are not talking about dealing with words which are said online. And this violence can be caused by so many, things. It can be caused by patriarchal structure. It can be caused by religious orthodoxy. It can be caused poverty. It can be caused by a lack of legal protection or inadequate response from
Khadija,
the concerned authority.
Sorry to interject, we're fast running out of time. I mean, this is part of a wide-ranging, sweeping proposals from Labour where they are pretty much going to become the thought police. I mean, George Orwell, Eat Your Heart Out, 1984. As I said, who decides what kind of speech is hateful, is misogynistic? One person's misogyny is another person's valid criticism. So who knows? A very dark path to go down. Khadija Khan from the Further Inquiry culture editor, thank you very much for joining me tonight. There we go. Right, coming up, I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with my panel, and I think they've been having a bit of a heated chat in the green room, so fingers crossed they're getting on by the time they return. But next, after waxing lyrical about cracking down on cronyism, it's revealed the PM's top team have raked in 500k of donations from unions in the past 5 years. So, is Labour a union of hypocrites? We'll debate that very, very shortly. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. Now your weather with Amy.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fine evening of weather ahead, some hazy sunshine, but it will be turning cloudier from the west with rain arriving tomorrow. And that's because we've got some low pressure system out towards the west. But first of all, we do have a ridge of high pressure across most of the country, and we have fairly settled conditions through Sunday evening. So fairly dry and clear for much of the country, but we do start to see that frontal system pushing into western Scotland overnight, that rain turning more persistent here, and we do still have this strengthening southerly breeze arriving from the west as well. Cool though first across the east, and perhaps down into single figures in some rural spots as well. But it will be quite a bright start to the day across eastern parts, particularly for the northeast of Scotland at first. But we do have quite a lot of cloud and rain across western parts, and that will be turning more persistent as we head through the day. Again, some sunshine for the far east, but Northern Ireland, very much a cloudy day with that rain becoming more persistent through the morning. Wales will start to see some showery, drizzly showers moving up from the southwest, but central parts and the southeast of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy, and we've got some increasing strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland, difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Tonight.
Corruption scandal that's engulfed the Tory party is corroding trust in our parliament.
Hello. Well, they promised to tackle corruption, so just why did Labour cabinet members accept union donations of nearly £500,000 before dishing out huge bumper pay deals to the public sector? Meanwhile, will far-left campaign groups obsessed with targeting former Tory MPs, including this lettuce stunt aimed at Liz Truss last week, now prove their worth by holding this government to account? Or are they maybe just a bunch of hypocrites? And Keir Starmer's new prisons minister was lauded as a breath of fresh air for wanting to keep criminals out of jail, but James Timpson has been curiously silent in the wake of his government's heavy-handed pursuit of rioters and social media users. Is Sir Keir's party already at war? Tomorrow's newspaper front pages are coming imminently, and tonight's panel are ready to go. I'm joined by political commentator Jonathan Liss and communications officer for the IEA, Reem Ibrahim. Oh, and what do you reckon happened to this brazen fare dodger?
No, but you need to leave the train. I'm not leaving the train. I'm not leaving the train. There's delaying all these people's journey. I'm not delaying no one. You are.
The Cabinet's union payday exposed. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 10 o'clock. Volodymyr Zelensky has said the operation in Russia's Kursk region aims to create a buffer zone. It's the first time the Ukrainian president has clearly stated the aim of the incursion into Russia's territory, which was launched on the 6th of August. He said it is now the primary task to destroy as much Russian war potential as possible. It comes after Ukraine says it has destroyed a second key bridge in Russia's Kursk region. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel to push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. It comes as over 20 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran-backed Hezbollah has continued firing rockets in retaliation. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister expressed cautious optimism about a ceasefire deal with Hamas, including for the release of hostages. The militant group isn't present for the talks, but as senior officials claimed, there's been no progress in reaching a deal. Back in the UK, extreme misogyny will be treated as terrorism for the first time under government plans to combat the radicalisation of young men online. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. The analysis will look at hatred of women as one of the ideological trends that the government says is gaining traction. Official figures reveal almost 500 people crossed the English Channel yesterday. At least 9 small boats made the journey following 2 days of no reported migrant arrivals. It brings the total number of migrants reaching UK waters so far this year to 19,000. But the Home Office insists it's creating a new border security command to tackle the problem. A don't swim alert's been issued for a popular Devon seaside town because of a sewage leak. South West Water says it can't keep up with the spill caused by a burst pipe at a nearby pumping station. It's apologised and insists engineers are working around the clock to fix the problem. It comes after the regulator Ofwat announced water bills will rise on average £94 over the next 5 years, and that's to cover the costs of upgrading Victorian-age infrastructure. And Donald Trump went on the attack at a campaign event in Pennsylvania last night, twice telling supporters he was better looking than his election rival. The former president was delivering a speech focused on the economy when he asked supporters if they'd mind if he went off script.
I'm a better looking person than Kamala.
His opponent, Kamala Harris, is embarking on a bus tour through western Pennsylvania today, one day ahead of the Democratic National Convention. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. We heard for years how Labour was going to rid the government of corruption and cronyism committed by the Tories, and that, of course, everything under Keir Starmer's watch would be rainbows and unicorns.
I say to all my fellow politicians, Labour and Tory, to change Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. No more VIP fast lanes, no more kickbacks for colleagues, no more revolving doors between government and the companies they regulate. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
Well, once again, it appears Labour's promises have been left wanting, because it can be revealed tonight that Labour cabinet ministers received hundreds of thousands of pounds in union donations before dishing out billions of pounds in public sector pay rises. So Keir Starmer's top team have accepted nearly £500,000 in cash and donations from Labour's union backers since 2019. Health Secretary Wes Streeting received £14,000 in support from unions over the past 5 years. Transport Secretary Louise Hay received £25,000, or just shy of it, 12,000 of which was donated either to her local party or indirectly via the Central Party by the GMB union in January 2020. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper received £10,000 in indirect donations from GMB. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, who had a drinks reception sponsored by the Community Trade Union, has received a total of £3,500 in donations in the past 5 years. And even Labour MP and ministerial aide Liam Conlon, who, by the way, is the son of Partygate investigator and now Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, he accepted a £4,000 donation from train driver union ASLEF just months before his department offered it a pay rise. So, is it any surprise that this Labour government caved into union demands so quickly after taking power? The Mail on Sunday reports Starmer's public sector payday, including mega deals for junior doctors, train drivers, teachers, nurses and senior NHS managers, will cost Britain a staggering £14 billion. Most of that will be paid for by the taxpayer. So what's happened as well to those commentators, the celebrities and campaign groups who have spent years holding truth to power by taking the previous Tory government to task over similar behaviour? The silence is deafening. I'm talking about the likes of Led by Donkeys, the IPA-drinking bores from Bristol, who as recently as last week were still spending their time chasing exiled former PM Liz Truss around with stupid stunts like this.
Do you vote on, I think it was Bill Clinton's advisor who said it's the economy's stupid. So I think that he will probably win.
On that.
I've got a list.
So are you really holding truth to power, or maybe are you just a bunch of hypocrites? Let's get the thoughts now of my panel. Political commentator Jonathan Liss and Communications Officer for the IEA, Reem Ibrahim. OK, good evening, you two.
Good evening.
Good evening. Right, yeah, here we are. So what do you make of this? Labour, for years, they've been banging on about cronyism and corruption and transparent government, and it turns out that in the years prior to them taking government, they've taken £500,000 in donations from unions. I mean, what's that about?
Yes, well, this isn't exactly news. I mean, the Labour Party was literally established to support the unions, to be funded by the unions and ultimately to bargain on behalf of the unions. So this isn't a surprise. We know that they're funded by the unions. But of course, we can draw the conclusion that that is why they are much, much softer with the unions than any other party in government. Now, I think when we're having these conversations about public sector pay has to be seen in the context of public sector spending. Our debt to GDP ratio, our debt is currently almost at 100%, 30-year high of GDP. That is incredible. We spend huge amounts of money. We have to have conversations about what is fair. In my view, ASLEF being given a pay rise to £69,000 a year and then deciding to subsequently strike again, you know, take an inch and they will ask for a mile. I think we have to have those conversations in the wider perspective. We cannot afford it, and we have to be clear that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer need to be so much firmer with the unions.
Jonathan Liss.
Well, I think that, look, as Reem points out, the Labour Party exists to serve working people. The unions are completely interwoven with the Labour Party and have been from the day Labour was born. So it's not a surprise that Labour takes money from the unions and that Labour MPs take personal donations from the unions as well. It's also, related to that, absolutely embedded in Labour ideology that working people should be paid fairly for the work they do. And that obviously we have just had a period of extraordinarily high inflation, and so workers were being given real terms pay cuts. And on a political level, the Labour
so is everyone else.
On a political level, but on a political
£69,000. I mean, they're not struggling.
Look, I think that most people support people being given fair pay, OK? And that actually, when you're in the public sector and you do really difficult jobs that are necessary jobs, then it's actually okay to pay people. But I think there's a political point as well, that Labour wanted to have a reset. We've had a period of massive unrest. And when we're talking about these pay rises, we also have to contrast how much the strikes have cost. You know, it's actually, in the main, it's cheaper to give these unions the pay rise they're asking for than to see sort of indefinite strikes.
So I think that we have one of the worst systems when it comes to our unions. Effectively, what we have allowed is private pet sector businesses, private sector organisations, which are unions, to negotiate with the government and effectively lobby them for special privileges.
Exactly. So these far-left campaign groups, people like Carol Vorderman, led by donkeys, all the other...
Led by donkeys, not far-left, they're centrists.
No, they're not.
They're centrists.
Jonathan, you have to be joking.
They don't attack Labour politicians in the same way.
Labour hasn't been in power yet.
They have been in power since July. They haven't had.
Give them a chance. Look. Come on. Of course they're chasing Liz Truss. That was hilarious.
They don't care about the Labour Party in the same way they care about...
To be fair to them, they're not in the room now, but to be fair to them, they have said, we're not party political, we will be attacking Labour. Look, come on. Look. Labour's been in power for 6 weeks. Labour's going to make a lot of mistakes. We know that. And when they do, I'll be attacking and criticising them as other people will. And of course, they'll be holding them to account.
On unions, they are far too weak on unions. I'm sorry, but ASLEF train drivers getting £69,000 a year already just got a pay rise, and then effectively after that saying we're going to strike every single week.
I mean, Labour are really at the mercy. It's a tabloid phrase. Really are at the mercy of their union paymasters. You award a massive pay rise to train drivers, and what do? Weeks later, so we're still striking.
Ben, the Conservative Party, the Conservative Party's in the pay of big business. No one ever some people didn't complain.
But Jonathan, the point
is that parties have to raise money from different sources, and obviously the Conservatives traditionally got money from big business and sort of high net worth individual donors, and the Labour Party has a bit of that, but also from the unions. That's completely just pride and proper in the way our system works.
I don't care where the money comes from. I just care what the policy looks like, and we know for a fact that the Labour Party is soft with unions because of where their money comes from, because of the funding. Now, regardless of what your perspective is on this, I actually think, and you're going to totally hate me for this, I actually think that employers and unions should be allowed to negotiate freely without the interference of government. The socialist utopia Sweden doesn't have a minimum wage law at all. They have no minimum wage laws. Unions and employers negotiate freely. I think if you don't turn up to work, the employer is well within their right to fire that person. I think you should be allowed to fire strikers if it comes to that, if it comes to this point.
OK, I just want some transparency from these people online. You know who you are, you're far-left agitators. You know, you make out you're holding, you know, you're so virtuous, you're holding power to account and being noble and, you know, making sure that the government's behaving itself. As soon as the Tories go, and you got your people in Labour, you just keep attacking the people who aren't relevant anymore.
I'm taking all of our taxpayer money. We work hard. Everybody in this country works hard. And these people are effectively lobbying the government for special privileges and asking for more and more and more. We cannot afford it. We simply cannot afford it.
Of course we can afford it.
Our debt is almost 100% of GDP.
Look.
It is absurd. We cannot afford it.
You know perfectly well the governments have to make decisions about what the priorities are. I happen to think that it's a priority that working people are paid fairly. The government, you know, has all kinds of absurd commitments about which people, I'm sure, watching this might disagree with, about sort of funding Trident, for example. All governments have to make decisions, but at the same time, governments do have ways of raising revenue which ordinary households don't. I'm sure Labour will do that as well.
Indeed. Governments can do whatever the hell they want. They can go and rob pensioners. They can go and rob people who are willing to invest and take risks in assets. So just hike up.
And they can invest in the economy.
Yeah. Got it. OK, Reem, Jonathan, it's feeling rather lonely, just us three, but thank you very much. Coming up, tomorrow's newspapers are here at 10:30 sharp. They're on the way imminently. But next, politics legend Anne Widdecombe discusses Labour's confused stance on law and order. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
We haven't talked about Meghan for a very long time.
Well, this is about suicidal ideations, which apparently Meghan Markle says she was having. It's not our place to question whether that is true or not. But she's saying this, Matt, isn't she, so that we can all be aware of online harms and therefore what? We can't have anonymity online anymore?
Yeah, I think it's a bit... I mean, obviously, you know, her personal story is very affecting, and I think it will help people, you know, to hear the issues. Because we hear issues around mental health, but we don't often hear in detail about suicidal ideation, which is that people having thoughts about suicide, not necessarily having a detailed plan to do it. So I think that's important. But then if you're going to say it's all about online harms, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you want to change? What rules do you want to introduce or you know, or alter? And I think that's the issue, that it doesn't actually go anywhere.
So, because she's given us a talk in America, she's supporting a charity, all very noble. So the suicidal... It was because of what she was reading about herself online? Is that what she said?
Well, I think she thinks it's because of the whole structure, really, of what she went through.
What did she go through?
About herself. Well, you know, she thinks she's been through trial by tabloids. Others would disagree.
That again.
Emma.
That again.
I don't often agree with Meghan Markle. In fact, I never agree with Meghan Markle. Good. But actually, on this, I'm reaching a point where I think the anonymity online and the abuse and the vitriol and the violence and the threats that you can fling at people online is actually really getting too much. And I think that it is dangerous. And I do think that when you receive really hateful, blasphemous messages from people, and it's always the be kind, the kind of hate mob, the kind of, well, we know who we're talking about. They're almost 99.9% anonymous. And I think we do need to look at that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. Now, do you remember the fanfare when Sir Keir Starmer announced the CEO of nationwide key-cutting firm Timpsons as his new prisons minister. Well, this is what James Timpson had to say when it came to his philosophy on prisons, criminals and rehabilitation.
We're addicted to sentencing. We're addicted to punishment. So many of the people who are in prison, in my view, shouldn't be there. A lot should, but a lot shouldn't. And they're there for far too long. Far, far too long. And that's just getting worse and worse. I meet people in prison regularly who are serving sentences longer than they've ever been alive for already. And I just think it's just, this is common sense being ignored, evidence being ignored, because there is this sentiment around punish and punish.
Well, Mr Timpson has been particularly quiet in recent weeks, not least during the riots and subsequent sentencing of people who simply tweeted things online or even watched the rioting from the sidelines. 2, 3, 4, even 5-year sentences for first-time offenders under Keir Starmer's orders. And the CPS now says it will pursue further sentences under stricter rioting charges that could carry sentences of up to 10 years. Surely Mr Timpson doesn't agree with that. I'm joined now by former Prisons Minister and Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. Good evening, Anne. Thank you for joining me.
Good evening.
It's a curious case, this, isn't it? Timpson was lauded when he came on the scene. He gave that interview saying, you know, he had this really liberal approach to criminality and sentencing, and now suddenly he's gone quiet.
He's gone very quiet, and bluntly, it's not acceptable for a Prisons Minister to be quiet in these sorts of circumstances. You know, and I speak as somebody who was Prisons Minister, and I mean, I know that it can be a bit awkward at times. But nevertheless, if there are issues of public interest over which you have the responsibility, then you answer for it. And so the fact that he's gone quiet and is neglecting that responsibility suggests to me very strongly that he's possibly at odds with the current policy. Now, I think the policy is right. If you actually look at what he said in that interview, he said he talked to people who'd been in prison longer than, you know, they'd been alive. He didn't quite mean it that way, but that must mean people in for hugely serious offences. That's murder. That's, you know, that's armed robbery. That is not tuppence off the bus fare. That is serious stuff, and you know, he didn't even acknowledge that in what he was saying. But to get back to the present situation, he should now have to state whether or not he agrees with the current policy for dealing with riots and disorder, which I thoroughly agree with. But I also want to know something else. Now, we've been told now for a very long time that our prisons are full and we can't take any more. And we've got to release prisoners. And now suddenly, you know, we're throwing people into jail almost every 5 minutes as the courts are dealing with these riots. Now, that's fine, but what's changed? Have they suddenly built another prison that we didn't notice?
Yeah, I know. Strange that, isn't it? What do you think's happened between Timpson and Starmer then? Do you think it's ever the case that maybe Timpson has publicly or privately rather said to him, I don't agree with this, and maybe he's been exiled? I mean, he's gone AWOL. He's gone quiet on Twitter, no posts, no interviews anywhere. What do you think might have happened on that front?
I think he disagrees. I don't know this, but I think he probably disagrees with the policy, which is, after all, against the philosophy that he's always espoused. I suspect Keir Starmer didn't want a resignation, so he's more or less allowed Timpson to withdraw from the scene. But as I say, it's not acceptable, and your profession shouldn't actually be putting up with it.
What's your take on these sentences that have been dished out from the rioting? You said then that you pretty much agree with them, right?
Yeah, I do. I do agree with very stiff sentencing in order to act as a deterrent. And we had riots, we had huge amounts of civil disorder, we had policemen and ordinary citizens injured, and I think it is right to say we need to put a stop to this. How do we do it? We do it with a deterrent. If only they had the same attitude towards deterrence in dealing with illegal immigration. I don't mean put them all in prison, I mean produce a deterrent.
Well, it just shows if they've got the will for something, they can do it.
They can do it, yeah.
And my only concern is, I mean, we played a clip on yesterday's show of Keir Starmer maybe 12 years ago saying that he was reluctant to pursue people, especially for online speech, because it really tests the grounds of stripping people of their freedom of speech. I agree with you that people, racist thugs who were frontline in those riots, smashing up mosques and looting shops, of course, deal with them. And I was very impressed with how swiftly they were dealt with. But when it comes to these people online who have been accused of quote-unquote anti-establishment rhetoric getting 3 years. 3 years for something they said online. They didn't go to the riots. They didn't throw stones or rocks or whatever else. They didn't beat anyone up. They posted anti-establishment rhetoric and accused of anti-Muslim rhetoric as well. Do you think that's fair, a sentence like that?
Well, I mean, I think that Keir Starmer's basic principle, which is that what is criminal offline is also criminal online, is sound. So if you're inciting disorder, if you're inciting hatred resulting in disorder, then if you did that offline, it would be an offence, and therefore, you know, there's a very clear argument that it should be an offence online. I agree with you. There is that very thin line where you cross from criminal incitement into freedom of speech. But I also think that with freedom comes responsibility, and that everybody now has got a responsibility as to what they post.
If Reform were in government during these riots, how do you think they would have handled it?
Well, first of all, I don't think there would have been the riots because we would have been dealing with illegal immigration, and that was what started the riots off. So I don't think there would have been any riots. If there were riots about anything at all, well, we have been very clear that we are a party of law and order, and we would have clamped down.
But Anne, apparently, if you suggest that the riots were because of concerns about migration, you're just a far-right thug. It's not true.
There is no doubt. There is no doubt at all in my mind that if the government had been seen to be attempting to deal with illegal immigration, then the cause of these riots could not have been invoked. People couldn't have said, "Look, you know, the government doesn't care." They couldn't have said that. But Starmer has no plan at all. Now, you may criticise Rishi Sunak for the Rwanda plan, but at least it was a plan.
Yeah.
This Prime Minister has no plan at all. Absolutely none. What is his deterrent to the boats? Answer, none at all. Now, if people do feel frustrated, that does not justify rioting, it doesn't justify disorder, and it doesn't justify any form of criminality at all. But that is where the frustration lies. And, you know, I've said throughout this business, and I've said it quite unapologetically, that if the government doesn't find an answer to the boats, then, you know, people are going to get more and more frustrated. It doesn't justify what they did, but it does possibly go some way to explain it.
And there was a poll out today from the Huffington Post online saying half of Brits, the sample size was 2,000 people, but they've decided half of Brits, blames Nigel Farage for inciting the riots. What do you think of that?
Well, all you have to do is to look at what has happened to our membership and look at what, you know, happened during the general election when we made immigration centre state. And people are very worried about it. You don't have to be racist, you don't have to be violent to be worried about immigration. For every thug that was out there on the streets causing mayhem, there were hundreds or possibly thousands of people sitting at home worrying about the same thing but doing so responsibly.
Yeah, OK. Well, I think they're trying to extradite Elon Musk now for daring to confront Keir Starmer on Twitter. Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, coming up, all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with my panel, plus their greatest Britons and union jackasses. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fine evening of weather ahead, some hazy sunshine, but it will be turning cloudier from the west with rain arriving tomorrow. And that's because we've got some low pressure system out towards the west. But first of all, we do have a ridge of high pressure across most of the country, and we have fairly settled conditions through Sunday evening. So fairly dry and clear for much of the country, but we do start to see that frontal system pushing into western Scotland overnight, that rain turning more persistent here, and we do still have this strengthening southerly breeze arriving from the west as well. Cool though first across the east, or perhaps down into single figures in some rural spots as well. But it will be quite a bright start to the day across eastern parts, particularly for the northeast of Scotland at first. But we do have quite a lot of cloud and rain across western parts, and that will be turning more persistent as we head through the day. Again, some sunshine for the far east, but Northern Ireland, very much a cloudy day with that rain becoming more persistent through the morning. Wales will start to see some showery, drizzly showers moving up from the southwest, but central parts and the southeast of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy, and we've got some increasing strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland. Difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done. Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo tonight, only on GB News. Let's go to our first newspaper front pages. We've just dropped hot off the press. The Metro, war on women haters. We just spoke about that in the last hour. Misogyny to be treated like terrorism, a.k.a. Labour's thought police, in my book. The Eye, thousands of children and teens spiked by vapes or drinks in 3 years. Almost 3,000 children believed to have been spiked with dangerous drugs, according to an Eye investigation. That's Freedom of Information request, I believe. The Daily Star. What is this? Yes, E.T. did phone home. It says, we told you so. E.T. phones home. Boffins have found mobile devices on the Peruvian alien mummies. Let's hope they've got a cheap data plan. OK, and the Times, big payouts for workers contacted out of hours. Interesting story, this. Workers who are consistently contacted by their bosses outside of normal working hours could get thousands of pounds more in compensation at employment tribunals under plans being considered by this Labour government. Very interesting. Communism on steroids. Right. What should we start with? What about the Metro, war on women, women haters?
Yes.
This sort of Orwellian-style thought police. Misogyny is going to be considered terrorism, Reem.
It's absolutely disgraceful, and I think it's so interesting because this really, I think, defines the differences between the way in which governments on the left and on the right actually approach freedom of expression. Now, I would say that the Conservative Party has had one of the worst track records on allowing freedom of expression. They wanted to shut down protests. We obviously had the particular legislation on it. And now we've got the Labour Home Secretary saying that we're going to be treating misogyny, sexism, in the same way as we treat terrorism. And I think that's absolutely absurd.
Look. Sorry.
No, go on. No,
look, I think that we have to be absolutely clear about what's being discussed here. No one is saying that being a misogynist is like being a terrorist. What people are saying, and this argument has actually gone back a long way, and the previous government was talking about it as well, is that there are sometimes attacks that are made by mostly men, or in fact men, who hate women, so-called incels, or people who've been so badly treated by ex-girlfriend and have a misogynistic impulse, who are deliberately targeting women. So, for example, in the attack on the Sydney shopping centre, it was only women who were attacked, and then the security guard who intervened with the attacker. And there are lots of attacks that we've seen in America, where you have these young men who go out targeting women because they hate women, because they can't get a girlfriend or they've been rejected by women, etc. So, right, so this is just about sort of creating a new category, as I understand it, a new category of terrorism that acknowledges that these are, in the same way that if you are attacking people from an Islamist perspective, that's called sort of, terrorism, and people kind of give it the Islamist label, and this is sort of misogynistic terror, and that people who are displaying signs of that can be referred to prevent or sort of counter extremism measures in the same way that sort of far-right extremists are Islamist extremists.
My real worry with this is that effectively we're looking at policing online speech, and we're going to go into a really, really dangerous territory of effectively stamping down freedom of expression. Now, we already see this today. We already see the government trying to look at restricting freedom of expression online. We saw it with the protests.
Yes, Yvette Cooper, she's promised to, quote, crack down on people pushing harmful and hateful beliefs and kickstart a new approach to fighting. Who decides what is a harmful or hateful belief?
And actually, Ben, I will say, I think that I'm quite staunch on this, on freedom of expression. I think you should be free to be hateful. If you want to say terrible things and you want to say bad things, you absolutely should be allowed to do it. I think freedom of expression is about allowing the grotesque, allowing the horrendous, allowing the disgusting to occur, because that way it is there in front of you and it is your right to say it.
Well, I think that, actually, Reem, I think that we might find a bit of agreement there, because I actually have a very high threshold for free speech, particularly online. I think that there are a lot of people who have been sort of pulled through the kind of the criminal justice system for things that, if you said it in a pub, would not meet the same reaction, because we have, under the terms of our law, tweeting something is basically publishing it, and obviously something that is published has a much lower threshold for sort of criminal liability, etc. So I do think that if you are inciting violence, if you are causing grotesque offence, but obviously it's a reasonable person. What would a reasonable person say? I do think the bar should be quite high. OK, should we move on to the Times? Reem, you picked this one out. Big payouts for workers contacted out of hours. So basically, if your boss is calling you when you're off shift, or calling you at the weekends when you're not working, asking you about something for next week, if you ever go to an employment tribunal for some reason, that would weigh heavily in your favour under these new plans from Labour.
Yes, I think it's absolutely absurd. So these are huge, huge payouts for workers, and it was sort of part of Labour's entire right to switch off campaign, and sort of looking at those particular plans, trying to allow people. Now, I think that the intention is to allow people to switch off outside of work and to allow people to have that work-life balance. However, it should be up to employers and employees to negotiate the terms of their contract. If I worked as a shift worker, and my shift was from 10 till 6, and my boss contacted me, tried to get me to work outside of that, I wouldn't do that. However, the majority of people work on salaries, and actually, for that particular perspective, it is perfectly reasonable for your boss to contact you outside of normal working hours. I think it's absurd. It's definitely not going to work. It's immoral, and actually it's restricting businesses from allowing to negotiate freely with their employees about the terms of their employment.
Jonathan, are you in favour of this?
I think that we do have a culture where people are being required to work or be on call basically all hours of the day, which obviously wasn't the case before email or mobile phones or whatever, and that has actually impacted people's personal life and their sort of work-life balance, and it has, in extreme cases, driven people to suicide. You see people who, these people who are working, 90-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, and there are more than 100. I think I'm not making that up. I'm just doing my maths quickly. But
I'm a journalist for a reason.
There are definitely people, particularly in America, when you sort of start as a lawyer or a banker, they say that they literally had sort of 3 hours a day for sort of eating and sleeping. That was it. And I think that that's the extreme end of it. But I think that it's completely reasonable to have written into a contract that these are the hours I can be contacted, barring complete emergencies. Depending on I agree that you should be allowed to negotiate that, and if the employer falls foul of that contract, then the employer should be liable.
This is making it so that it's not. So I agree with you, Jonathan. I think that you should be allowed to negotiate it with your employer, and you can negotiate what is allowed and what is not allowed. However, this is not doing that. This is the government, the Labour government, saying that we're going to allow this to happen for everyone. Yeah. We're talking about taxpayer money being used effectively there to give them those particular thousands of pounds going to those particular people in those tribunals.
But this is meant to protect workers from bosses who aren't respecting their time.
If anything, it's going to not protect workers. It's going to have the opposite effect, because they're not going to be able to negotiate freely what their particular terms are.
I think there's a lot of nuance to it. If you're a young worker starting out your career in an industry, I think you've just got to suck it up and you've got to do the bad jobs, you've got to take calls when you don't want to, you've got to work when you don't want to and get your way up the ladder. That's how it works. I remember when I first started in journalism at newspapers, you'd get calls at 3 in the morning asking you to go places on stories. You're not going to say, oh, well, no, because employment law says that apparently you can't contact...
But there is such thing as exploitation, come on.
Yeah, but this is not exploitation. People these days are so work shy. I think people these days are so lazy and they just don't want to work.
People have been saying this since the dawn of time. You know that people have been saying this since the dawn of time. The young people don't want to work.
3 million people on out-of-work benefits. Many of them are claiming that they're depressed or too anxious to work.
Okay.
I think we've got to abolish that entirely.
Well, oh, come on. What you're saying that we're saying that none of them deserves benefits.
Not all of them, but I will say this.
You said you should abolish it altogether.
No, not altogether. Those particular people, I'm saying those particular people, there's 5.3 million. Either, if all of them are sick...
I think it's 2.5 million who are claiming long-term sickness.
So 1/5 of the adult population in Manchester are claiming long-term sickness. I think what happened is that they were claimed under short-term sickness, then they changed the rules so they were long-term.
Talking of sponges, let me just show you this clip and get your thoughts on it. So when taking public transport, normally, for most of us, you'd pay for your ticket, right? Well, not this guy. Take a look.
You need to get off the train because you haven't got a ticket.
That's not my stop, though, mate.
Yeah, no, but that doesn't matter. You don't have a ticket. All these other people have tickets. No? But you need to leave the train.
I'm not leaving the train. I'm not leaving the train.
You're delaying all these people's journeys.
I'm not delaying no one. You are. I lost my wallet. I need to go to where I need to go to. You could let the train go back now. But he's emotional. Look, there's no sympathy. He said I'm lying.
Apologies for the delay in this service.
Yeah, it should
be. Person in this carriage.
Should be.
Refusing to buy tickets, thinking you travel for nothing.
So there we go, the gall of it. Filming the inspector, not buying a ticket, refusing to get off, and putting it even on TikTok for the world to see. I mean, do these people have no shame whatsoever?
It seems like they have no shame. And I've got to say, I think what's so interesting about that is there seems to be this kind of desire to effectively allow criminal activity to occur and people then film it. We all remember Mizzy, the old TikTok star who went to prison, and I had a bit of a viral clip with him once when I was on a different show with him. But he is such a good example of that. People love it. People love people breaking the law. People love people pushing the boundaries. And social media encourages people to break the law and encourages that kind of radical behaviour. That guy, I'm sure, got hundreds of thousands of views as a result of breaking the law on that train.
It's not the most sensible idea to film yourself committing crimes in general. It does provide good evidence. But yeah, look, obviously people should pay their fares. We're living in a time where, a lot of people, we have a cost of living crisis. That doesn't excuse fare evasion. But clearly TfL in particular is spending a lot of money in London on
mentality.
Fare evasion.
You're trying to claim online clout for being skint and a sponger. I just don't understand it.
It's funny, and there'll be many people that relate to that online, and that's where the popularity comes from.
We're lost. Britain is broken.
Declined.
Britain's broken.
Well, he broke it.
Who broke it? The question is, how do we get ourselves out of it? Right, coming up next, more of tomorrow's front pages, plus my panel's Greatest Britain and Union Jackasses. This is Ben Leo Tonight on GB News. Back in a tick.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Joining us now is GB News Royal Correspondent Cameron Walker to explain exactly what this is all about. Cameron, hi. We have heard Meghan and Harry talk about their mental health issues before in the past. So tell us more about this site they're launching.
Yes, it's a very serious topic, a very ambitious site that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have launched this weekend. It's called the Parents Network, and it's set up in collaboration with 6 or 7 groups of parents who have lost, tragically, a child to suicide, linked to their social media use. So it's connecting and offering help to parents who've lost a child, and that can be anything from cyberbullying, depression and anxiety, sexual exploitation, eating disorders and other traumas. And sadly, there are too many examples across the world, and Meghan and Harry have decided to tackle this very important topic, but also very difficult topic to cover. Now, Meghan's critics, we heard from that clip there, she was talking about her own experience of suicidal thoughts when she was a working member of the royal family. Her critics will say, why on earth is she making it all about about herself. To be fair to Meghan, when the journalist Jane Pooley asks her, Jane Pooley specifically asked her about her suicidal thoughts, and she was a working member of the royal family. She wasn't expecting it. She did give, to be fair, quite an eloquent answer, and Prince Harry then talks about the fact that all parents across the world need to be first responders when they're talking about helping their children overcome mental health problems related to social media use. There's lots of help and resources on the Archewell website, and I think it's going to be a while before we see if any of the words we've heard from Duke and Duchess of Sussex in this interview have any substance or any tangible impact going forward.
Brilliant. That's our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Finley, tonight only on GB News. Time now to return to tomorrow's front pages. More have just dropped, including the Daily Telegraph. Keir Starmer accused of weakening support for Ukraine. The PM's under pressure to allow Storm Shadow missile strikes inside Russia. The Guardian. Blinken joins 11th hour talks on Gaza's ceasefire deal, and the death of Jonathan. I'm very ignorant here. You said he was a French movie star. Alain Delon.
Alain Delon.
OK, Alain Delon has passed away. Showing my age there. Apologies, viewers. The Daily Mail. Half of Labour MPs in pay of unions. I touched on this, I guess, briefly in the show with cabinet members, but it turns out half of MPs even have raked in £1.8 million in donations since the election was called. The Daily Express. Tories united in support of winter fuel crusade. All 6 Tory leadership candidates have backed the Express campaign demanding a U-turn on scrapping the winter fuel payment. And the Daily Mirror. British mum dies after Brazilian butt lift. OK, should we talk about the Express? It seems like, of course, Labour's scrapping of the winter fuel allowance appears to have done the Conservative Party's job for them by uniting all the leadership contenders. Priti Patel, James Cleverly, Badenoch and co. They've done the Tories a favour there, haven't they?
They all seem to be in support of it. Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually think that it's profoundly unconservative to support a universal fuel payment to those particular people. I think that actually, if you are a pensioner, your pension should be means tested. I think that handing out huge amounts of money to a quarter of whom those particular people are millionaires, I think is actually profoundly unconservative and actually quite liberal in their. They need to be more conservative in their economic restraint in their spending. What's interesting about this is, as you said, that every single Tory leadership contender supports this campaign that the Express have launched in order to campaign to U-turn on the scrapping of the winter fuel payment. Again, I think it's a waste of money. I think it should be targeted. There's absolutely no reason why taxpayer money should be going to millionaires.
Jonathan, I guess you support Ream in that ethos, do you?
You know what, I kind of feel mixed things about it's not a scrapping, it's a means testing of it. I think that actually means testing is sort of quite unprogressive in some ways, because not only do you spend more money on the means testing than actually you often do on giving the universal benefit, but actually there is a principle of universal benefits that, you know, if you are of a certain cohort, then you should be able to get something. Obviously, it's not entirely universal because it's not a winter fuel payment for everybody, it's just pensioners. And I do see the argument that a lot of rich pensioners are making themselves, they have the money, they don't need it, and that money should... But I think the problem is that there are a lot of people caught in the middle of this policy who are not millionaires, millionaires who are going to suffer
But hang on. You're both saying that a quarter of pensioners are millionaires. They haven't got.
I didn't say a quarter.
They haven't got millions of cash in their bank.
No, they haven't got the cash in their bank. They've got their assets in bricks and mortar.
Yeah, well, that's completely different.
That's the point. Well, of course it's different, but ultimately they would have more of that money. They would be cash flow if we were to solve the housing crisis and allow those particular people to downsize. That's besides the point. I actually think that this is a principled conversation about whether or not what the Conservative Party stands for, what Conservatives themselves stand for, and actually it seems not to be fiscal constraint. It seems to be spending more money
and bribing pensioners.
I mean, that's true. To vote for them. And I'm sorry, but this is a profound...
The Conservatives have bribed pensioners. Like, I don't believe in bribing demographics of voters or punishing them. I think that Labour was on balance wrong to kind of limit this benefit, and it's obviously given the Conservative candidates a gift. But I completely agree with Reem that it is against should be against their principles.
I said this earlier before the break. Our debt to GDP ratio is incredibly high. We spend huge amounts of money, and I'm sorry, but millionaire pensioners are not the top of the priority.
Well, some of them are millionaires.
Just quarter of them are.
OK, listen, just because pensioners, who are now pensioners, worked hard and grafted all their life, they bought homes and houses and were lucky enough now...
So why are we paying for them?
Let me finish. Stop interrupting. They're lucky enough now to inherit capital gains value in their houses because of mass migration. It's pushed housing prices up. Just because they're millionaires on paper, living in the homes they worked hard to buy, doesn't mean they should be stripped of any help they get in favour of, say, train drivers or public sector pay workers or housing migrants who no one asked for migrants to be here.
No, my problem is not. No, that's absolutely not true. We spend double the entire Ministry of Defence budget on pensions.
And they deserve it. They built this country.
That's fine. That's completely fine. So then why are we spending huge amounts of money on those particular people, and at the same time spending more of that money on train driver salaries every year? I'm not saying that we need to be spending the money elsewhere. I'm saying we, hard-working taxpayers, should not be footing the bill.
OK, let's look at the Daily Telegraph. Starmer accused of weakening support for Ukraine. So the Prime Minister's under pressure to allow Storm Shadow missile strikes inside Russia. I mean, this comes as, well, tonight, Ukraine has invaded Russia, breaking tonight. So Keir Starmer, in the days following his election win, did say, I think it was a gaffe, he said, yeah, we're going to allow Ukraine to use our Storm Shadow missiles to fire inside Russia. He got a lot of critique for that. He was slammed for it, quickly U-turned on it. It wasn't a very good look. But he's now under more pressure to actually allow this to happen, Reem.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm not completely sure why he U-turned in the first place. I mean, it was...
Well, because no one wants World War III, that's why.
No, nobody wants World War III. Nobody wants them to be... And again, it would send a huge, huge political message to the Russians themselves if the UK were to do that. But we've already picked a side. We've already decided who we're supporting. And I think it is absolutely pertinent that Ukraine win this war. Because ultimately, if we allow the Russians to win, if we allow Putin's aggression to win across Europe, then what we are doing is we're allowing aggression to win and we're allowing authoritarianism to win. And I think that we cannot allow that to happen. You know, I think Churchill stood for what is right in this country, stood for democracy, stood for freedom, and I think we need to be on that side and standing for it today.
OK, Jonathan?
I think it's a really difficult one. The situation has changed in the few short weeks since Labour won office. Ukraine has made several incursions into Russia. It's consolidating territory inside Russia. That might be quite a wise quite a wise strategy in a way, because it forces Russia to the table. Ukraine can now say, all right, fine, we'll give up the territory we have if you give up the territory you have. And that's certainly an interesting new strategy. Obviously, I wouldn't support any kind of attacks on civilian infrastructure, and Ukraine says it's not going to hold on to any of the territory in the long term. But I do think it would be perhaps foolish or unwise for the UK government to say, well, you can use any UK weaponry you like once Ukraine has actually done something that UK obviously purports not to agree with. No one supports an invasion, do they?
Exactly. It adds fuel to the fire.
Fast running out of time. I mean, Ukraine are using British Challenger tanks in this incursion on what's the name of that region? Is it the Kursk?
The Kursk region, yeah.
Anyway, time now for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Reem, your Greatest Britain nominee, please.
Yes, I am nominating the wonderful Margaret Thatcher, who served this country very well indeed, and I believe was the last Conservative, true Conservative, to enter number 10. I think that in the midst of the Conservative Party leadership election, in the midst of everything that we're talking about, the future of the right, the future of freedom, I think we should look back at the past, and Margaret Thatcher did all of those things and stood for them.
I'm terribly grateful for your nomination.
Jonathan?
Most kind of you.
Your GB nominee.
Look, I think this is apples and pears, because Reem has kind of like done a Greatest Britain's thing. I was thinking about someone from the last week, so my answer's going to be quite different. But I thought someone, a hero, there aren't that many of them around, but I thought that someone would be Banksy. I'm a big fan of Banksy's art anyway, and I really like the fact that he's currently on such a productive spree and sort of making all these entertaining graffitis in various parts of London and elsewhere, which brings joy to local people. Then after he does that, there's often a bit of controversy if people kind of like want to remove it and other people kind of want to face it, and then the fun is lost immediately. But it's a nice thing to be doing.
I used to be a fan of Banksy when I was a kid growing up, but then I realised he was a raging socialist. So,
We don't like
so we'll go with Margaret Thatcher as today's GB.
Oh, is it? You beat you? OK, fine.
Reem, very quickly, we're running out of time. Your Union Jackass, please.
Yes, mine is Rachel Reeves, because she's lied to all of us. She lied to us at the election. She said she wasn't going to increase taxes, and now actually at the budget we saw that it's going to happen. We're going to see increases in taxes.
Jonathan, your G...
My Jackass is Donald Trump, because you look at the latest press conferences he's been doing, and this is a man who is not in cognitive peak, shall we say. And the latest thing, which I was laughing out loud at when you played it a moment ago, is him saying that he was better looking than Kamala Harris, which is probably the funniest thing he said all week.
OK, well, I think if Donald Trump is lucky enough to be elected, he may be the best chance of world peace, so when it comes to Ukraine, Russia. So we'll see. UJ is going to be Rachel Reeves.
What a surprise.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Reem, Ibrahim, Jonathan List, thanks very much. I'll be back again from next week. Next up, it's Headliners, and yeah, have a great week and a pleasant weekend. I'm off on a very short holiday tomorrow, the wife and I. No kids, feel a bit guilty about it, but I'll see you next week. Here's your weather with Amy. Good night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. A fine evening of weather ahead, some hazy sunshine, but it will be turning cloudier from the west with rain arriving tomorrow. And that's because we've got some low pressure system out towards the west. But first of all, we do have a ridge of high pressure across most of the country, and we have fairly settled conditions through Sunday evening. So fairly dry and clear for much of the country, but we do start to see that frontal system pushing into western Scotland overnight, that rain turning more persistent here, and we do still have this strengthening southerly breeze arriving from the west as well. Cool though first across the east, and perhaps down into single figures in some rural spots as well. But it will be quite a bright start to the day across eastern parts, particularly for the northeast of Scotland at first. But we do have quite a lot of cloud and rain across western parts, and that will be turning more persistent as we head through the day. Again, some sunshine for the far east, but Northern Ireland, very much a cloudy day with that rain becoming more persistent through the morning. Wales will start to see some showery, drizzly showers moving up from the southwest, but central parts and the southeast of England will be seeing sunshine to start the day on Monday. And we will continue with that very much east-west split. Sunshine for the far east, but very cloudy, and we've got some increasing strengthening southerly winds, and that rain will be turning heavy as we head later on into Monday. A rain warning is in force for southwest Scotland, difficult driving conditions here. Cool underneath this cloud and rain, best into the mid-teens, but still some warmth for the southeast of England. By Tuesday, most of that rain will have cleared away much of the country, still lingering on in the far northeast, and it'll be a breezy day with blustery showers, particularly across parts of England, and there'll be some strong winds across the far northwest of Scotland too. Heading into the rest of the next week, it will be staying unsettled with particularly wet and windy weather into Wednesday and Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
we could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.